So, did Colossal actually bring back the dire wolf from extinction?
First question should be a very easy answer, should be yes or no. Biology sometimes is more complex than that. The easiest answer, if you are asking a true direwolf as they existed 12,000 years ago, no, that's not what this is. This is an animal that is meant to resemble the direwolf based on the genome of the direwolf, and there's a lot to dive into there. So, the simplest answer for that is that this is something entirely new. And when things that are entirely new happen in biology, we don't always have a perfectly appropriate name. And I don't really know what to call this right now. They're calling them dire wolves because that's what they're derived from, that's what they're based on. But it truly is like, in my mind, it's a nameless thing at this point. I don't know what to call it. It makes talking about it really tough. But they have created an animal that resembles a direwolf and is based on the genome of the direwolf. And we can dive more into that nuance too in a topic because there's so many things here where I can say one thing and then dive 5 minutes into it. And I don't want it to turn necessarily into that. But short answer to that question, this isn't a direwolf as direwolves once existed. It's not literally a direwolf. It's not 100% a direwolf. But Colossal, they have stated this. I was disappointed when I first heard it, but Beth Shapiro she's gone on the record and said, based on our current techniques, our current technology, there is no possible way to recreate an animal that is identical to these ancient animals. The DNA is just not preserved at a level that allows for us to, but they have done some unique new things to bring bring it more into reality than ever before. So we'll start with that for an answer that should be a yes or no answer. I wish I could say yes, these are true dire wolves. They aren't necessarily true dire wolves, but there is still a lot of really cool science here to talk about.
Can you give us a synthesized version of how exactly we go from, let's say, 100 years ago, the idea that you could even recreate the genome of an extinct animal and create this new hybrid species? How we go from that being total science fiction to where we are today? How were these things achieved?
I mean, the first step there is DNA and really discovering DNA, which is, I don't know, almost 100 years ago at this point. I don't have a timeline in front of me. Don't know exactly, don't quote me, but it's been a long time. Started to understand what DNA was. And then by what was it? I don't know. I don't know what year they brought Dolly back, but it was like the late 90s. They were able to take cells from living animals and then clone those animals. And by now, it's like a really well understood process. Cloning is something, if you have a dog you love, it passes away, you can send off genetic samples to companies who will do this cloning on that dog. Cloning is a thing now. It's possible. The next step beyond cloning, because this isn't just a clone, the next step I would say was CRISPR, where CRISPR was a big deal. And I had eighth graders in my classroom. I think it was the year COVID hit. We used CRISPR in the classroom, and we used CRISPR to genetically engineer E. coli so that it would glow in the dark. But that was like the start of CRISPR, where it was really easy stuff. E. coli, it reproduces asexually. You end up with one knockout version of a gene. You use CRISPR, you're able to insert it. And because the bacteria reproduces asexually and the gene makes it glow in the dark, you could see which ones had taken that you put in there. You could isolate them, and then you're growing this genetically engineered E. coli. So that's like the next step, gene editing along with this cloning. Now, though, they have brought, and this is what they are really kind of pushing forward right now with these de-extinction projects and the woolly mouse. When they released that, did you see the woolly mouse?
Yes.
It didn't seem like much of a deal, honestly, but when it did come out, things clicked for me. And I'm like, all right, this is what we're doing here. We're looking at traits and trying to recreate traits in animals that don't have them. And that's where this kind of next step is at now, because you can't create a woolly mouse by just changing one knockout gene, which was like round one through two, three, four of CRISPR or whatever. But you can do it if you can successfully make multiple changes, which puts stress on the cell, and it's why it really wasn't something they were doing for a while. So that is really what these de-extinction projects right now are pushing forward, is this ability to work with many different changes in a single organism. The mouse was, don't quote me, we're just talking in general, but like 8 or 9 or so. The dire wolf was 15 across 20 locations or so. The mammoth that they are working on is like 80 or 100 different changes. So what we are kind of seeing here with the woolly mouse, the dire wolf, is working towards this experiment with the woolly mammoth-like elephants that requires even more editing than has been done at this point. So they compare these projects, like they compare the mammoth like elephant. It gets hard to say that every time, but that's kind of
Hmm.
how I try to phrase them. They compare it to like NASA trying to land people on the moon. It was a huge feat. A lot of people probably didn't think it was possible, but by attempting to do it, they crossed so many benchmarks along the way. They created so many new technologies along the way that the real benefits, like landing on the moon, awesome achievement. But if you think about like how it helped humanity, it was all of the benefits that came along the way with that. And
Mm-hmm.
that is very much what I see here with this project of like escalating the ability to change the traits of animals. And we can get more into it at some point. I'm sure you'll ask like why. But the simple answer to the why is it's not really just about creating an animal that looks like a dire wolf. It's about helping out our current animals by adjusting them in ways as we move into the future because we got to do something. Like the other option is we don't do anything, and as we take up more space and habitats become more fragmented and populations aren't able to persist into the future, genetic rescue is going to be needed. And this is like the ultimate toolkit for genetic rescue.